Good afternoon everyone, it's Paul here. I thought we'd cover more in the Enterprise Architecture series. I've got today's programme of work is looking at Agile versus Waterfall from an architect's view. So these are obviously two distinct project delivery methods that architects get involved with right from the very early start of the projects. So I'm going to just cover a little bit about each of them, what the descriptions are of both, and maybe some learning areas that I've observed over the last couple of years with them. So, Waterfall, what is it? So the simple solution to explain it is that you have a problem and the solution is known. The business will usually have an indicative view from either talking to their customers or management information or anything like that, and they will have a view that they want to implement a solution for the customer. So it's less customer focused than Agile, but it's a very linear approach with lots of planning up front, and does tend to have a timeline that will break out both the business and the technical capabilities and cover a lot of the information systems of the enterprise that you're designing within. So what does it typically look like? So you could have an RFI, which is a request for information. You could have an RFQ, which requests for quotation. These tend to be from vendors. When you're involved in maybe COTS software, or you might be looking at a bid process, but you usually have something called a PID, which is a project initiation document. Project managers tend to manage and be the custodian of that. But what you tend to find is the business architects and business analysts will look at the functional requirements. These are the things that the product has to offer the end user. So that could be things like an ATM is a good example. It has to do a PIN number, has to issue cash, it has to give a balance. So they tend to be very verb noun type things. So show balance, create PIN number, change PIN number, stuff like that. So non-functional requirements is where the technical side comes in. So the data application and technology architects tend to be more interested in the non-functional requirements. So that's things like capacity, scalability, availability, performance, security, those kind of areas. So you'll simply follow the usual design, build, test and run area, and then tend to have a process of change after it through your change boards. So that's kind of what a waterfall component model looks like. From a governance perspective, usually we'll have gated process, we'll obviously have outline proposals, and then we'll have detailed proposals, then we'll probably have high level designs from all the different architects, usually maybe forming one document or multiple documents, so those artifacts, and especially building the capabilities out in enterprise tool sets. So those are maybe the kind of standard governance approach. So what does Agile look like in comparison? Well, as I've kind of said, the problem is known to the business, but this is where the solution is unknown, and this is where it becomes an iterative approach. So we don't load up all the plan at the very beginning. We do a discovery phase. We start to build hypothesis. We get customer journeys, personas, start to build out those types of artifacts. We maybe create actors and functions diagrams. That's what I try and get customers to do. It starts to help build out customer journey maps. So those are the things that you then start to build in the alpha. And maybe from a technical capability perspective, you maybe work with DevOps, you maybe work with subject matter experts. And those are the technical capabilities that you have to build out. So you may do analysis of maybe say 14 CRM systems on paper, work out who they are, use products like Gartner to do desk-based research, and then you maybe take two products into what's called a bake-off, and you're actually alpha testing those products with some customer journeys which you think are good to test. So you then maybe take alignment from architecture teams as you go through, trying to stay close to the TDA, the Technical Design Authority, which is usually your enterprise architects and your subject matter architects, security and so on. And that's really, when you start to look at building out the alpha solution to take into beta, and you realistically at that point try to define the products that you're going to actually take into production, and that would be in your live. So that's discovery, alpha, beta, which can be split into two, both private, small internal group of testing, and then a public beta, which takes, you may have experienced that with some government websites. You do a public beta, and that allows real live customers to actually start testing the solution. You might actually take some customers in beta private that are real testers from your focus group who don't actually work in your company. It doesn't always happen like that. It just depends on how big your company is and what budgets you've got. So then you go into a live approach. Now the iterative part of this is we do see things called CI/CD, which is continuous integration, continuous development. So that's when developers are constantly releasing features that the customers want, and they would still go through that alpha, beta, live processing. So maybe cover CI/CD in the future, but for now that's really just about a development release cycle. So the thing there is that I've described as a very standard waterfall approach that have been around for a long time, and then you've obviously got the Agile manifesto, which has been around for a lot less, 4 or 5 years. In true fashion, I would say maybe only in the last 3 years companies are really implementing it. In the enterprise anyway, maybe smaller startups have had the luxury of not having to have such governance in place. But Gartner calls it Bimodal, and some other platforms like Forrester and that I think call it that as well. So what's that? Bimodal. So we have mode 1 where we have Waterfall, and mode 2 where we have Agile. So Agile is all about empowering the teams to make decisions inside those business data applications and technology domains. But Agile doesn't tend to recognise those domains. It recognises customers much more important than the technical aspects of it. So you need your technical capabilities that have products at the back of it to help you build those customer journeys. But inside the alpha, and obviously maybe even in the early days of discovery, which isn't actually building anything, you might start to align products and services that you think are useful for those customer journeys, but they might not exist in the current support model. So it might be something that's in the Google Cloud Platform as its entirety. Could be something like Google Functions, or it could be API Gateway, and your current taxonomies, your current lifecycle or roadmaps of technologies don't actually have staff on board, or don't actually have a way to build those or provide them on the estate. So that's kind of what happens in Agile, where you might go out and try these products, but you need to get them into the estate. So how do you do that? So that's about close engagement with TDA stakeholders, bringing them in early at discovery to let them know the products that you're looking at, and then basically think about it like it's 2 train tracks, and what you're trying to do is merge the Agile train track to the enterprise mode 1 waterfall style train track. So that's pretty much what I think is the best way to look at empowering Agile teams with new technologies that still want to work in an enterprise. So what's the biggest mistake I think that I see? So with Agile, there's a slight challenge that you end up with teams that end up supporting it within the DevOps community inside the actual programs. So in previous environments I've seen that costs grow, technical support stays in the same place. So what happens is IP stays in that way by intellectual property. So you end up with a lot of staff staying in the one place, and not actually giving benefits to the wider community. So you're not growing a DevOps community, you're growing project communities. And that's a danger that you end up with department costs soaring. So that's just one thing that I think that doesn't get seen in Waterfall, because you have a real upfront planned cost, whereas with Agile you don't have that upfront planned cost, you have iterative planned costs. So that's today's area of topic that I thought would be interesting to chat about. Might try and go into them in future a bit more, but for now I hope you've enjoyed that, and just want to say thanks very much, and I hope you have a good evening. Cheers.